ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Fletcher.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm David Fletcher. I thought what we'd do is discuss the progress that's been made in tank design in the last 100 years. And for this purpose, we're going to have to be a little bit dodgy and pretend that the Mark IV is an original from 1917. It's not. It was actually the replica made for the War Horse movie, but still, it'll do. And I thought we'd start off probably down on the bottom, as it were, with the suspension. On a First World War tank, and this applies to all the British First World War tanks, the actual suspension was non-existent. The rollers, which run along the track, are sandwiched between the frames, and they're held in place by an axle running through, so they can't move up and down at all. They're literally fixed in place. Whereas Challenger 2 has the hydro-pneumatic suspension, which enables it to give the crew a reasonably comfortable ride, even going flat out across country. And that makes quite a difference, because they're quite heavy tanks, and with a suspension like that, just holding it up makes a bit of a difference. The other thing I thought I'd point out is with the Mark IV, and with all the First World War tanks, the only method of adjusting the track tension, and believe it or not, track stretches, even though it's made of metal, and you try pulling it, you won't get anywhere, it does actually stretch after a time, so you have to adjust the tension of the track to take it up. And what you did with the Mark IV was loosened off a nut, moved the idler wheel forward, and tightened up the nut again. On Challenger 2, the driver can do all this without getting out of his seat. He's got a hydraulic arrangement which makes the idler move forwards and backwards, and what he can actually do is adjust the tension of the track to suit the ground he's traveling over. Now, the next thing is the actual armor the tanks are built of. Armor on Mark IV, about 10 millimeters. It's proof against rifle or small arms fire, but it won't keep out an artillery shell. Challenger 2, on the other hand, has got the latest version of Chobham armor. It's Chobham Phase 2, known as Dorchester, and it means that the tank's proof against just about any other kind of armor-piercing round, whether it's a kinetic energy round or one of the heat rounds that are used quite commonly now. And that makes the tank almost invulnerable. And in this day and age, when symbols like the body bag are so vitally important, then quite clearly you need something like this that means the crew are going to survive any action which they go into. And the Challenger 2, if you look at it, is covered in a, well, it looks like a set of pajamas, someone described it as the other day. It's actually a thermal coating. It's made by Rheinmetall in Germany. It's called the Solar Shield, and the purpose of it is actually to keep the heat that's generated by the tank somehow inside. It prevents the tank from giving off a thermal signature, which these days can be detected. Of course, in the Mark IV, it didn't make any difference. They didn't have anything like that. Clouds of smoke came out of it anyway, so you just judged it by that. You didn't worry about thermal imaging and that kind of thing. And that really makes the tanks that much different. So the other thing that the pajamas do is cut down its radar symbol. So as the rounded edges of the fabric are going over the armor, they tend to reflect less radar. And even that helps nowadays on the battlefield when you don't want to be identified, if you can help it, till the last minute. Though the noise it makes, you'd think you could hear it a mile off. Now, the power unit's worth discussing. The original Mark IV was powered by a Daimler 105 horsepower, 6-cylinder petrol engine. Now, I say Daimler, but it was Daimler of Coventry. It was the British company, and nothing to do with the original German Daimler company. But that was 105 horsepower. Now, in Challenger 2, you've got a Perkins V12 turbocharged diesel, which develops about 1,200 horsepower. So you can see the tremendous difference there. It means that Challenger 2 can move at, oh, what should we say, 59 kilometers an hour, about 37 miles an hour, whereas the poor old Mark IV goes along at about 3 miles an hour, about walking pace, because that's all they needed in those days. And without suspension, you wanted to go as slowly as possible. Now, the next thing is the turret. Of course, the Mark IV doesn't have a turret. It has sponsons on the side, and it's actually a male tank. You had female tanks with machine guns, but the male had a 6-pounder in each sponson with about a 90-degree arc of fire. It had quite a good range, but you really fought at ranges you could see. So you're lucky if you're firing more than a kilometre at a time. Whereas Charlie 2 could pick up a target up to 4 kilometres away and hit it. It's been done. And that's quite remarkable in itself. The Challenger 2's got a 120mm rifled gun. Alongside the main gun is a chain gun, which is like a machine gun, really, which they use as an auxiliary weapon, or it's an alternative weapon, really, for use against infantry and soft-skin vehicles. On top of the turret is another machine gun station. That's remote controlled, and it can be worked from inside the turret. The loader actually operates it, and he can fire it without getting out and without exposing himself at all. There are two other things. On top of the gun, there is the image intensifier, which is that sort of lump you can see sticking up above the gun, and that it works like a sight and puts the gun back on target every time. There's also a laser rangefinder, which is in front of the commander's cupola. Now that works by using a laser to measure the range to the next nearest target, and it means that the commander can actually select a target, and that's indicated straight away to the gunner. As soon as that's done, the commander goes on to the next target and takes that. So he can pick up 2 targets at a time and move on to another one after that if he wants to, which is quite remarkable in itself. Well, that's nearly covered the heavy tanks, really, and give you some idea. It's only brief, but it'll give you some idea of how things have progressed in the last 100 years. I can talk about other details, the tracks and so on, but basically, the only thing that hasn't really changed are the men in the tank. You've got 4 in Challenger 2. You had 8 in a Mark IV, but the caliber of the men themselves is the same, and they really do a fantastic job. Really aspects of the tank which haven't changed even in 100 years. Well, that's just about it, ladies and gentlemen. I'll call a halt there and get driven off and put away till next year. And hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen,